Act 3. Scene. The living room wall has been replaced, and all we see now of its lighted interior is through the two windows. Otherwise, everything is the same. And this act follows the preceding without any lapse of time. Tyrone is still trying with shaking hands to get his cigarette lighted. Finally, he succeeds and takes a deep inhale and starts pacing back and forth a few steps as if in a cell of his own thought. He swears defensively. God damn it. You'll be crying in your beer in a minute. He begins to sing sneeringly, half under his breath, and a snatch from an old sob song, popular in the 90s. And a baby's cries can't waken her and the baggage coach ahead. His sneer changes to a look of stricken guilt and grief. Christ. He seems about to break down and sob, but he fights this back. Cut it out, you drunken fool. Josie can be seen through the windows returning from the kitchen. He turns with a look of relief and escape. Thank God. He sits on the boulder and waits. Josie stops by the table in the living room to turn down the lamp until only a dim light remains. She has a quart of whiskey under her arm, 2 tumblers, and a pitcher of water. She goes through her bedroom and appears in the outer doorway. Tyrone gets up. Ah, at last, the old booze. He relieves her of the pitcher and tumblers as she comes down the steps. Josie, with a fixed smile. You'd think I'd been gone years. You didn't seem so perishing for a drink. Tyrone, in his usual easy kidding way. It's you I was perishing for. I've been dying of loneliness. Josie, you'll die of lying someday, but I'm glad you're alive again. I thought when I left you, you were really dying on me. Tyrone, no such luck. Josie, don't talk like that. Come have a drink. We'll use the boulder for a table, and I'll be barkeep. He puts the pitcher and tumblers on the boulder, and she uncorks the bottle. She takes a quick glance at his face, startledly. What's come over you, Jim? You look as if you've seen a ghost. Tyrone looks away dryly. I have. My own. He's punk company. Josie. Yes, it's the worst ghost of all. Your own. Don't I know? But this will keep it in its place. She pours a tumbler half full of whiskey and hands it to him. Here, but wait till I join you. She pours the other tumbler half full. Tyrone, surprised. Hello. I thought you never touched it. Josie, glibly. I have, on occasion. And this is one. I don't want to be left out altogether from celebrating our victory over Harder. She gives him a sharp, bitter glance, meeting his eyes, which are regarding her with puzzled wonder. She forces a laugh. Don't look at me as if I was up to some game. A drink or two will make me better company and help me enjoy the moon and the night with you. Here's luck. She touches his glass with hers. Tyrone shrugs his shoulders. All right, here's luck. They drink. She gags and sputters. He pours water in her glass. She drinks it. He puts his glass and the pitcher back on the boulder. He keeps staring at her with a puzzled frown. Josie. Some of it went down the wrong way. Tyrone. So I see. That'll teach you to pour out bows instead of drinks. Josie. It's the first time I ever heard you complain a drink was too big. Tyrone. Yours was too big. Josie. I'm my father's daughter. I have a strong head, so don't worry, I'll pass out and you'll have to put me to bed. She gives a little bold laugh. Sure, that's a beautiful notion. I'll have to pretend I'm... Tyrone, irritably. Nix on the raw stuff, Josie. Remember you said, Josie, resentment in her kidding. I'd be different? That's right. I'm forgetting it's your pleasure to have me pretend I'm an innocent virgin tonight. Tyrone, in a strange tone that is almost threatening. If you don't look out, I'll call you on that bluff, Josie. He stares at her with a deliberate, sensualist look that undresses her. I'd like to. You know that, don't you? Josie, boldly. I don't at all. You're the one who's bluffing. Tyrone grabs her in his arms with genuine passion. Josie. Then, as suddenly, he lets her go. Nix, let's cut it out. He turns away. Her face betrays the confused conflict within her of fright, passion, happiness, and bitter resentment. He goes on with an abrupt change of tone. How about another drink? That's honest-to-God old bonded bourbon. How the devil did Phil get a hold of it? Josie. Tom Lombardo, the bootlegger, gave him a case for letting him hide a truckload in our barn when the agents were after him. He stole it from a warehouse on faked permits. She pours out drinks as she speaks, a half tumbler full for him, a small one for herself. Here you are. She gives him his drink, smiles at him coquettishly, beginning to show the effect of her big drink by her increasingly bold manner. Let's sit down where the moon will be in our eyes and we'll see romance. She takes his arm and leads him to her bed. She sits on the top step, pulling him down beside her, but on the one below. She raises her glass. Here's hoping before the night's out you'll have more courage and kiss me at least. Tyrone frowns, then kiddingly. That's a promise. Here's how. He drains his tumbler. She drinks half of hers. He puts his glass on the ground beside him. A pause. She tries to read his face without his noticing. He seems to be lapsing again into vague preoccupation. Josie. Now don't sink back half dead and alive in dreams the way you were before. Tyrone, quickly. I'm not. I had a good final dose of heebie-jeebies when you were in the house. That's all for tonight. He adds a bit maudlinly, his two big drinks beginning to affect him. Let the dead past bury its dead. Josie. That's the talk. There's only tonight and the moon and us. And the bonded bourbon. Have another drink. And don't wait for me. Tyrone. Not now, thanks. They're coming too fast. He gives her a curious, cynically amused look. Trying to get me soused, Josie? Josie starts quickly. I'm not. Only to get you feeling happy so you'll forget all sadness. Tyrone, kiddingly. I might forget all my honorable intentions too, so look out. Josie. I'll look forward to it. And I hope that's another promise, like the kiss you owe me. If you're suspicious I'm trying to get you soused, well, here goes. She drinks what is left in her glass, too. There now. I must be scheming to get myself soused, too. Tyrone. Maybe you are. Josie, resentfully. If I was, it'd be to make you feel at home. Don't all the pretty little Broadway tarts get soused with you? Tyrone, irritably. There you go again with that old line. Josie. All right, I won't. Forcing a laugh. I must be eaten up with jealousy for them, that's it. Tyrone. You needn't be. They don't belong. Josie. And I do? Tyrone. Yes, you do. Josie. For tonight only, you mean? Tyrone. We've agreed there is only tonight, and it's to be different from any past night for both of us. Josie, in a forced kidding tone. I hope it will be. I'll try to control my envy for your Broadway flames. I suppose it's because I have a pretty picture of them in my mind as small and dainty and pretty. Tyrone. They're just gold-digging tramps. Josie, as if he hadn't spoken. Well, I'm only a big, rough, ugly cow of a woman. Tyrone. Shut up. You're beautiful. Josie, jeeringly, but her voice trembles. God pity the blind. Tyrone. You're beautiful to me. Josie. It must be the bourbon. Tyrone. You're real and healthy and clean and fine and warm and strong and kind. Josie. I have a beautiful soul, you mean? Tyrone. Well, and I don't know much about ladies' souls. He takes her hand. But I do know you're beautiful. He kisses her hand. And I love you a lot. In my fashion. Josie stammers. Jim. Hastily forcing her playful tone. Sure, you're full of fine compliments all of a sudden, and I ought to show you how pleased I am. She pulls his head back and kisses him on the lips. A quick, shy kiss. That's for my beautiful soul. Tyrone. The kiss arouses his physical desire. He pulls her head down and stares into her eyes. You have a beautiful, strong body too, Josie. And beautiful eyes and hair and a beautiful smile and beautiful warm breasts. He kisses her on the lips. She pulls back frightenedly for a second, then returns his kiss. Suddenly he breaks away in a tone of guilty irritation. Nix. Nix. Don't be a fool, Josie. Don't let me pull that stuff. Josie. Triumphant for a second. You mean it. I know you meant it. Or you meant it. I know you meant it. Then with resentful bitterness, roughly. Begod, you're right. I'm a damned fool to let you make me forget you're the greatest liar in the world. Quickly. I mean, the greatest kidder. And now how about another drink? Tyrone, staring at nothing. Vaguely. You don't get me, Josie. You don't know, and I hope you never will know. Josie blurts out bitterly. Maybe I know more than you think. Tyrone, as if she hadn't spoken. There's always the aftermath that poisons you. I don't want you to be poisoned. Josie. Maybe you know what you're talking about. Tyrone. And I don't want to be poisoned myself. Not again. Not with you. He pauses slowly. There have been too many nights and dawns. This must be different. I want... His voice trails off into silence. Josie, trying to read his face uneasily. Don't get in one of your queer spells now. She gives his shoulder a shake, forcing a light tone. Sure, I don't think you know what you want, except another drink. I'm sure you want that. And I want one too. Tyrone, recovering himself. Fine. Grand idea. He gets up and brings the bottle from the boulder. He picks up his tumbler and pours a big drink. She's holding out her tumbler, but he ignores it. Josie. You're not polite, pouring your own first. Tyrone, I said a drink was a grand idea. For me. Not for you. You skipped this one. Josie, resentfully. Oh, I do I? Are you giving me orders? Tyrone. Yes. Take a big drink of moonlight instead. Josie, angrily. You'll pour me a drink if you please, Jim Tyrone, or... Tyrone stares at her, then shrugs his shoulders. All right. If you want to take it that way, Josie, it's your funeral. He pours a drink into her tumbler. Josie, ashamed but defiant, stiffly. Thank you kindly. She raises her glass, mockingly. Here's to tonight. Tyrone is staring at her, a strange, bitter disgust in his eyes. Suddenly he slaps at her hand, knocking the glass to the ground. Tyrone, his voice hard with repulsion. I've slept with drunken tramps on too many nights. Josie stares at him, too startled and bewildered to be angry. Her voice trembles with surprising meekness. All right, Jim, if you don't want me to. Tyrone now looks as bewildered by his action as she does. I'm sorry, Josie. Don't know what the drink got into me. He picks up her glass. Here, I'll pour you another. Josie, still meek. No, thank you. I'll skip this one. She puts the glass on the ground. But you drink up. Tyrone. Thanks. He gulps down his drink. Mechanically, as if he didn't know what he was doing, he pours another. Suddenly, he blurts out with guilty loathing. That fat, blonde pig on the train, I got her drunk. That's why. He stops guiltily. Josie, uneasily. What are you talking about? What train? Tyrone. No train. Don't mind me. He gulps down the drink and pours another with the same strange air of acting unconsciously. Maybe I'll tell you later when that'll cure you for all time. Abruptly, he realizes what he is saying. He gives the characteristic shrug of shoulders cynically. Nuts. The Brooklyn boys are talking again. I guess I'm more stewed than I thought. In the center of the old bean, at least. Dully. I better beat it back to the inn and go to bed and stop bothering you, Josie. Josie, bullyingly and pityingly. Well, you won't, not if I have to hold you. Come on now, bring your drink and sit down like you were before. He does so. She pats his cheek, forcing a playful air. That's a good boy. And I won't take any more whiskey. I have all the effect from it I want already. Everything is far away and doesn't matter, except the moon and its dreams. And I'm part of the dreams, and you are too. She adds with a rueful little laugh. I keep forgetting the thing I've got to remember. I keep hoping it's a lie, even though I know I'm a damned fool. Tyrone, hazily. Damned fool about what? Josie. Never mind. Forcing a laugh. I've just had a thought. If my poor old father had seen you knocking his prize whiskey on the ground, holy Joseph, he'd have had 3 paralytic strokes. Tyrone grins. Yes, I can picture him. He pauses with amused affection. But that's all a fake. He loves to play tight. He loves to play tightwad. But the people he likes know better. He'd give them his shirt. He's a grand old scout, Josie. A bit maudlin. The only real friend I've got left, except you. I love his guts. Josie, tensely, sickened by his hypocrisy. Oh, for the love of God. Josie shrugs his shoulders. Tyrone shrugs his shoulders. Yes, I suppose that does sound like moaning stuff, but I mean it. Josie, do you? Well, I know my father's virtues without you telling me. Tyrone, you ought to appreciate him because he worships the ground you walk on, and he knows you a lot better than you think. He turns to smile at her teasingly, as well as I do, almost. Josie, defensively. That's not saying much. Maybe I can guess what you think you know. Forcing a contemptuous laugh. If it's that, God pity you. You're a terrible fool. Tyrone, teasingly. If it's what? I haven't said anything. Josie. You'd better not, or I'll die laughing at you. She changes the subject abruptly. Why don't you drink up? It makes me nervous watching you hold it as if you didn't know it was there. Tyrone. I didn't, at that. He drinks. Josie. And have another. Tyrone, a bit drunkenly. Will a whore go to a picnic? Real bonded bourbon. That's my dish. He goes to the boulder for the bottle. He is steady on his feet as if he were completely sober. Josie, in a light tone. Bring the bottle back so it'll be handy and you won't have to leave me. I miss you. Tyrone comes back with the bottle. He smiles at her cynically. Still trying to get me soused, Josie? Josie. I'm not such a fool with your capacity. Tyrone. You better watch your step. It might work. And then think of how disgusted you'd feel with me lying beside you, probably snoring, as you watch the dawn come. You don't know. Josie, defiantly. The hell I don't! Isn't that the way I've felt with every one of them after? Tyrone, as if he hadn't heard. Bitterly. But take it from me. I know. I've seen too many goddamned many dawns creeping grayly over too many dirty windows. Josie ignores this boldly. But it might be different with you. Love could make it different. And I've been head over heels in love ever since you said you loved my beautiful soul. Again, he doesn't seem to have heard. Resentfully. Well, don't stand there like a loon mourning over the past. Why don't you pour yourself a drink and sit down? Tyrone looks at the bottle and tumbler in his hands as if he'd forgotten them, mechanically. Sure thing. Real bonded bourbon. I ought to know. If I had $1 for every drink of it I had before Prohibition, I'd hire our dear bully Harder for a valet. Josie stiffens and her face hardens. Tyrone pours a drink and sets the bottle on the ground. He looks up suddenly into her eyes, warningly. You'd better remember I said you had beautiful eyes and hair. And breasts. Josie. I remember you did. She tries to be calculatingly enticing. So sit down, and I'll let you lay your head. Tyrone. No. If you don't watch your step, I've got to. He sits down but doesn't lean back. And don't let me get away with pretending I'm so soused I don't know what I'm doing. I always know. Or part of me does. That's the trouble. He pauses, then bursts out in a strange, threatening tone. You better look out, Josie. She was tickled to death to get me pie-eyed. Had an idea she could roll me, I guess. She wasn't so tickled about it later on. Josie. What's she? He doesn't reply. She forces a light tone. I hope you don't think I'm scheming to roll you. Tyrone, vaguely. What? Coming to indignantly. Of course not. What are you talking about? For God's sake, you're not a tart. Josie, roughly. No, I'm a fool. I'm always giving it away. Tyrone, angrily. That lousy bluff again, eh? You're a liar. For Christ's sake, quit the smut stuff, can't you? Josie, stung. Listen to me, Jim. Drunk or not, don't you talk that way to me, or... Tyrone. How about you're not talking the old smut stuff to me? You promised you'd be yourself. Pauses, vaguely. You don't get it, Josie. You see, she was one of the smuttiest talking pigs I've ever listened to. Josie. What she? Do you mean the blonde on the train? Tyrone starts sharply. Train? Who told you? Quickly. Oh, that's right. I did say. Vaguely. What blonde? What's the difference? Coming back from the coast. It was long ago, but it seems like tonight. There is no present or future. Only the past happening over and over again. Now. You can't get away from it. Abruptly. Nuts, to hell with that crap. Josie. He came back from the coast about a year. She checks herself. Tyrone, dully. Yes, after Mama's death. Quickly. But I've been to the coast a lot of times during my career as a third-rate ham. I don't remember which time or anything much, except I was pie-eyed in a drawing room the whole 4 days. Abruptly. What were we talking about before? What a grand guy Phil is. You ought to be glad you got him for a father. Mine was an old bastard. Josie. He wasn't. He was one of the finest, kindest gentlemen ever lived. Tyrone, sneeringly. Outside the family, sure. Inside, he was a lousy tightwad bastard. Josie, repelled. You ought to be ashamed. Tyrone. To speak ill of the dead? Nuts. He can't hear. And he knows I hated him anyway, as much as he hated me. I'm glad he's dead. So is he. Or he ought to be. Everyone ought to be if they have any sense. Out of a bum racket. At peace. He shrugs his shoulders. Nuts, what of it? Josie, tensely. Don't, Jim. I hate you when you talk like that. Forcing a light tone. Do you want to spoil our beautiful moonlight night? And don't be telling me of your old flames or on trains or not. I'm too jealous. Tyrone, with a shudder of disgust. Of that pig? He drinks his whiskey as if to wash a bad taste from his mouth, and takes one of her hands in both of his, simply. You're a fool to be jealous of anyone. You're the only woman I care a damn about. Josie, deeply stirred in spite of herself, her voice trembling. Jim, don't. Forcing a tense little laugh. All right, I'll try and believe that. For tonight. Tyrone, simply. Thanks, Josie. A pause. He speaks in a tone of random curiosity. Why did you say a while ago I'd be leaving for New York soon? Josie stiffens, her face hardening. Well, I was right, wasn't I? Unconsciously, she tries to pull her hand away. Tyrone, why are you pulling your hand away? Josie stops. Was I? Forcing a smile. I suppose because it seems crazy for you to hold my big ugly paw so tenderly. But you're welcome to it if you like. Tyrone, I do like. It's strong and kind and warm, like you. He kisses it. Josie, tensely. Oh, for the love of God. She jerks her hand away. Then hastily forces a joking tone, wasting kisses on my hand. Sure, even the moon is laughing at us. Tyrone, nuts for the moon. I'd rather have one light on Broadway than all the moons since Ramses was a pup. He takes cigarettes from his pocket and lights one. Josie, her eyes searching his face, lighted up by the match. You'll be taking a train back to your dear old Broadway tomorrow night, won't you? Tyrone, still holding the burning match, stares at her in surprise. Tomorrow night, where'd you get that? Josie, a little bird told me. Tyrone, blows out the match in a cloud of smoke. You better give that bird the bird. By the end of the week is the right dope. Phil got his dates mixed. Josie, quickly. He didn't tell me. He was too drunk to remember anything. Tyrone, he was sober when I told him. He called up the executors when we reached the inn after leaving here. They said the estate would be out of probate within a few days. I told Phil the glad tidings and bought drinks for all and sundry. There was quite a celebration. Funny, Phil wouldn't remember that. Josie, bewildered, not knowing what to believe. It is funny. Tyrone shrugs his shoulders. Well, he's stewed to the ears. That always explains anything. Then, strangely, only Sometimes it doesn't. Josie. No, sometimes it doesn't. Tyrone. Goes on without real interest, talking to keep from thinking. Phil certainly has a prize bun on tonight. He never took a punch at me before. And that drivel he talked about owning me one. What got into his head, I wonder? Josie, tensely. How would I know if you don't? Tyrone. Well, I don't. Not unless. I remember I did try to get his goat. Simpson sat down with us. Harder sent him to. You remember after Harder left here, I said the joke was on you, that you'd made this place a gold mine? I was kidding, but I had the right dope. What do you think he told Simpson to offer? 10 grand? On the level, Josie. Josie, tense. So you accepted? Tyrone. I told Simpson to tell Harder I did. I decided the best way to fix him was to let him think he'd got away with it. And then, when he comes tomorrow morning to drive me to the executor's office, I'll tell him what he can do with himself, his bankroll, and tin-oiled tanks. Josie knows he is telling the truth. So relieved she can only stammer stupidly. So, that's the truth of it. Tyrone smiles. Of course, I did it to kid Phil, too. He was right there listening, but I know I didn't fool him. Josie, weakly. Maybe you did fool him for once. But I don't know. Tyrone. And that's why he took a swing at me? He laughs. But there is a forced note to it. Well, if so, it's one hell of a joke on him. His tone becomes hurt and bitter. All the same, I'll be good and sore, Josie. I promised this place wouldn't be sold except to him. What the hell does he think I am? He ought to know I wouldn't double-cross you and him for 10 million. Josie, giving away at last to her relief and joy. Don't I know? Oh, Jim, darling. She hugs him passionately and kisses him on the lips. I knew you'd never. I told him. She kisses him again. Oh, Jim, I love you. Tyrone again with a strange, simple gratitude. Thanks, Josie. I mean, for not believing I'm a rotten louse. Everyone else believes it, including myself, for a damned good reason. Abruptly changing the subject. I'm a fool to let this stuff about Phil get under my skin, but I remember telling him tonight I'd even written my brother and got his okay on selling the farm to him. And Phil thanked me. He seemed touched and grateful. You wouldn't think he'd forget that. Josie, her face hard and bitter. I wouldn't, indeed. There's a lot of things he'll have to explain when he comes at Sun. Hastily. When he comes back. She pauses, then bursts out. The damned old schemer, I'll teach him to... Again, checking herself. To act like a fool. Tyrone smiles. You'll get out the old club, eh? What a bluff you are, Josie. Teasingly. You and your lovers, Messalina, when you've never... Josie, with a faint spark of her old defiance. You're a liar. Tyrone. Pride is the sin by which the angels fell. Are you going to keep that up with me? Josie, feebly. You think I've never, because no one would, because I'm a great ugly cow? Tyrone, gently. Nuts. You could have had any one of them. You kidded them till you were sure they wanted you. That was all you wanted. And then you slapped them groggy when they tried for more. But you had to keep convincing yourself. Josie, tormentedly. Don't, Jim. Tyrone, you can take the truth, Josie, from me. Because you and I belong to the same club. We can kid the world, but we can't fool ourselves, like most people, no matter what we do. Nor escape ourselves, no matter where we run away. Whether it's the bottom of a bottle or a South Sea island, we'd find our own ghosts there waiting to greet us. Sleepless with pale commemorative eyes, as Rossetti wrote. He sneers to himself. The old poetic bull, eh? Crap. Reverting to a teasing tone. You don't ask how I saw through your bluff, Josie. You pretend too much. And so do the guys. I've listened to them at the inn. They all lie to each other. No one wants to admit all he got was a slap in the puss when he thinks a lot of the other guys made it. You can't blame them. And they know you don't give a damn how they lie, so... Josie. For the love of God, Jim, don't. Tyrone. Phil is wise to you, of course, but although he knew I knew, he would never admit it until tonight. Josie, startled, vindictively. So he admitted it, did he? Wait till I get a hold of him. Tyrone. He'll never admit it to you. He's afraid of hurting you. Josie. He is he? Well, almost hysterically. For the love of God, can't you shut up about him? Tyrone glances up at her, surprised, then shrugs his shoulders. All right. I wanted to clear things up, that's all. For Phil's sake as well as yours. You have a hell of a license to be sore. He's the one who ought to be. Don't you realize what a lousy position you put him in reason Trollop Act? Josie, tensely. No, he doesn't care except to use me in his scheming. Tyrone, don't be a damned fool. Of course he cares, and so do I. He turns and pulls her head down and kisses her on the lips. I care, Josie. I love you. Josie, with pitiful longing. Do you, Jim? Do you? She forces a trembling smile. Faintly. Then I'll confess the truth to you. I've been a crazy fool. I am a virgin. She begins to sob with a strange forlorn shame and humiliation. And now you'll never, and I want you to, now more than ever, because I love you more than ever after what's happened. Suddenly she kisses him with fierce passion. But you will. I'll make you. To hell with your honorable scruples. I know you want me. I couldn't believe that until tonight, but now I know. It's in your kisses. She kisses him again with passionate tenderness. Oh, you great fool. As if I gave a damn about what happened after. I'll have had tonight and your love to remember for the rest of my days. She kisses him again. Oh, Jim, darling, haven't you said yourself there's only tonight? She whispers tenderly. Come with me. She gets to her feet, pulling at his arm with a little self-mocking laugh. But I'll have to make you leave before sunrise. I mustn't forget that. Tyrone. A strange change has come over his face. He looks her over now with a sneering, cynical lust. He speaks thickly as if he was suddenly very drunk. Sure thing, kiddo. What the hell else do you suppose I came for? I've been kidding myself. He steps up beside her and puts his arm around her and presses his body to hers. You're the goods, kid. I've wanted you all along. Love nuts. I'll show you what love is. I know what you want, bright eyes. She is staring at him now with a look of frightened horror. He kisses her roughly. Come on, baby doll, let's hit the hay. He pushes her back in the doorway. Josie, stricken,ly. Jim, don't. She pulls his arms away so violently that he staggers back and would fall down the steps if she didn't grab his arm in time. As it is, he goes down on one knee. She is on the verge of collapse herself, brokenly. Jim, I'm not a whore. Tyrone remains on one knee, confusedly as if he didn't know what had happened. What the hell? Was I trying to rape you, Josie? Forget it. I'm drunk, not responsible. He gets to his feet, staggering a bit, and steps to the ground. Josie, covering her face with her hands. Oh, Jim, she sobs. Tyrone with vague pity. Don't cry. No harm done. You stopped me, didn't you? She continues to sob. He mutters vaguely as if talking to himself. Must have drawn a blank for a while. Nuts. Cut out the faking. I knew what I was doing. Slowly, staring before him. But it's funny. I was seeing things. That's the truth, Josie. For a moment I thought you were that blonde pig. Hastily. The old heebie-jeebies. Hair of the dog. He gropes around for the bottle and his glass. I'll have another shot. Josie takes her hands from her face fiercely. Pour the whole bottle down your throat if you like. Only stop talking. She covers her face with her hands and sobs again. Tyrone stares at her with a hurt and sad expression. Dully. Can't forgive me, eh? You ought to. You ought to thank me for letting you see. He pauses, as if waiting for her to say something, but she remains silent. He shrugs his shoulders, pours out a big drink mechanically. Well, here's how. He drinks and puts the bottle and glass on the ground dully. That was a nightcap. Our moonlight romance seems to be a flop, Josie. I guess I better go. Josie, dully. Yes, you'd better go. Good night. Tyrone. Not good night. Goodbye. Josie lifts her head. Goodbye. Tyrone. Yes, I won't see you again before I leave for New York. I was a damned fool to come tonight. I hoped, but you don't get it. How could you? So what's the good? He shrugs his shoulders hopelessly and turns toward the road. Josie. Jim! Tyrone. Turning back, bitter accusation in his tone again. Whore. Who said you were a whore? But I warned you, didn't I, if you kept on? Why did you have to act like one, asking me to come to bed? That wasn't what I came here for. And you promised tonight would be different. Why the hell did you promise me that if all you wanted was what all the others want? And if that's all love means to you? Then guiltily. Christ, I don't mean that, Josie. I know how you feel. And if I could give you happiness, but it wouldn't work. You don't know me. I'd for myself and for you. I've poisoned it already, haven't I? But it would be a million times worse after. No matter how I tried not to, I'd make it like all the other nights. For you, too. You'd lie awake and watch the dawn come with disgust, with nausea retching your memory and the wine of passion poets blab about, a sour aftertaste in your mouth of Dago red ink. He gives a sneering laugh. Josie, distractedly. Jim, don't. Please don't. Tyrone, you'd hate me and yourself. Not for a day or two, but for the rest of your life. With a perverse, jeering note of vindictive boastfulness in his tone. Believe me, kid, when I poison them, they stay poisoned. Josie, with dull bitterness. Goodbye, Jim. Tyrone, miserably hurt and sad for a second, appealingly. Josie. Gives the characteristic shrug of his shoulders. Simply. Goodbye. He turns toward the road. Bitterly. I'll find it hard to forgive, too. I came here asking for love. Just for this one night because I thought you loved me. dully. Nuts. To hell with it. He starts away. Josie watches him for a second, fighting the love that, in spite of her, responds to his appeal. Then she springs up and runs to him with fierce, possessive, maternal tenderness. Come here to me, you great fool, and stop your silly blather. There's nothing to hate you for. There's nothing to forgive. Sure, I was only trying to give you happiness because I love you. I'm sorry I was so stupid and didn't see. But I see now, and you'll find that I have all the love you need. She gives him a hug and kisses him. There is a passion in her kiss, but it is a tender, protective, maternal passion, which he responds to with an instant, grateful yielding. Tyrone, simply, thanks, Josie. You're beautiful. I love you. I knew you'd understand. Josie, of course I do. Come now. She leads him back, her arm around his waist. Tyrone, I didn't want to leave you. You know that. Josie, indeed I know it. Come now, we'll sit down. She sits on the top step and pulls him down on the step below her. That's it, with my arm around you. Now lay your head on my breast, the way you said you wanted to. The way you said you wanted to do. He lets his head fall back on her breast. She hugs him, gently. There now. Forget all about my being a fool and forgive. Her voice trembles, but she goes on determinedly. Forgive my selfishness, thinking only of myself. Sure, if there's one thing I owe you tonight after all my lying and scheming, it's to give you the love you need. And it'll be my pride and my joy. Forcing a trembling echo of her playful tone. It's easy enough, too, for I have all kinds of love for you. And maybe this is the greatest of all because it costs so much. She pauses, looking down at his face. He has closed his eyes, and his haggard, dissipated face looks like a pale mask in the moonlight. At peace as a death mask is at peace. She becomes frightened. Jim, don't look like that. Tyrone opens his eyes, vaguely. Like what? Josie, quickly. It's the moonlight. It makes you look so pale and with your eyes closed. Tyrone, simply. You mean I looked dead? Josie, no, as if you'd fallen asleep. Tyrone speaks in a tired, empty tone as if he felt he ought to explain something to her. Something which no longer interests him. Listen, and I'll tell you a little story, Josie. All my life, I had just one dream. From the time I was a kid, I loved racehorses. I thought they were the most beautiful things in the world. I liked to gamble, too. So the big dream was that someday I'd have enough dough to play a cagey system of betting on favorites, and follow the horses south in the winter and come back north with them in the spring, and be at the track every day. It seemed that would be the ideal life for me. He pauses. Josie. Well, you'll be able to do it. Tyrone. No, I won't be able to do it, Josie. That's the joke. I gave it a tryout before I came up here. I borrowed some money on my share of the estate and started going to tracks. But it didn't work. I played my system, but I found I didn't care if I won or lost. The horses were beautiful, but I found myself, what of it? Their beauty didn't mean anything. I found that every day I was glad when the last race was over and I could go back to the hotel and the bottle in my room. He pauses, staring into the moonlight with vacant eyes. Josie, uneasily. Why did you tell me this? Tyrone, in the same listless monotone. You said I looked dead. Well, I am. Josie. You're not. She hugs him protectively. Don't talk like that. Tyrone. Ever since Mama died. Josie, deeply moved, pityingly. I know, I felt all along it was that sorrow was making you. She pauses gently. Maybe if you talked about your grief for her, it would help you. I think it must be all choked up inside you, killing you. Tyrone, in a strange warning tone. You'd better look out, Josie. Josie. Why? Tyrone, forcing his cynical smile. I might develop a crying jag and sob on your beautiful breast. Josie, gently. You can sob all you like. Tyrone. Don't encourage me. You'd be sorry. A deep conflict shows in his expression and tone. He is driven to go on in spite of himself. But if you're such a glutton for punishment, after all, I said I'd tell you later, didn't I? Josie, puzzled. You said you'd tell me about the blonde on the train. Tyrone. She's part of it. I lied about that. He pauses, then blurts out sneeringly. You won't believe it could have happened. Or if you did believe, you couldn't understand or forgive. Quickly. But you might. You're the one person who might. Because you really love me. And because you're the only woman I've ever met who understands the lousy, rotten things a man can do when he's crazy drunk and draws a blank. Especially when he's nutty with grief to start with. Josie, hugging him tenderly. Of course I'll understand, Jim darling. Tyrone stares into the moonlight hauntedly. But I didn't draw a blank. I tried to. I drank enough to knock out 10 men, but it didn't work. I knew what I was doing. He pauses, dully. No, I can't tell you, Josie. You'd loathe my guts and I couldn't blame you. Josie. No. I'll love you no matter what. Tyrone, with strange, triumphant harshness. All right. Remember, that's a promise. He pauses, starts to speak, and pauses again. Josie, pityingly. Maybe you better not, if it'll make you suffer. Tyrone. Trying to welch now, eh? It's too late. You've got me started. Suffer? Christ, I ought to suffer. He pauses and closes his eyes. It is as if he had to hide from sight before he can begin. He makes his face expressionless. His voice becomes impersonal and objective, as though what he told concerned some man he had known but had nothing to do with him. This is the only way he can start telling the story. When Mama died, I bid on the wagon for nearly 2 years. Not even a glass of beer. Honestly. And I know I would have stayed on, for her sake. But she had no one but me. The old man was dead. My brother had married, had a kid, had his own life to live. She'd lost him. She had only me to attend to things for her and take care of her. She'd always hated my drinking, so I quit. It made me happy to do it. For her. Because she was all I had, all I cared about. Because I loved her. He pauses. No one would believe that now. Who knew? But I did. Josie, gently. I know how much you loved her. Tyrone. We went out to the coast to see about selling a piece of property the old man had bought there years ago. And one day she suddenly became ill, got rapidly worse, went into a coma, brain tumor. The doc said no hope. Might never come out of a coma. I went crazy. Couldn't face losing her. The old booze yen got me. I got drunk and stayed drunk. And I began hoping she'd never come out of the coma and see I was drinking again. That was my excuse, too, that she'd never know. And she never did. He pauses, then sneeringly, "Nix." Kidding myself again. I know damned well just before she died she'd recognize me. She saw I was drunk, and she closed her eyes so she couldn't see, and was glad to die. He opens his eyes and stares into the moonlight as if he saw this deathbed scene before him. Josie, soothingly, "Shh. You only imagine that because you feel guilty about drinking." Tyrone, as if he hadn't heard, closes his eyes again. After that, I kept so drunk I did draw a blank most of the time. But I went through the necessary motions, and no one guessed how drunk. He pauses. But there are things I can never forget. The undertakers, and her body in a coffin with her face made up. I couldn't hardly recognize her. She looked young and pretty, like someone I remembered meeting long ago. Practically a stranger, to whom I was a stranger, cold and indifferent. Not worried about me anymore. Free at last. Free from worry, from pain, from me. I stood looking down at her, and something happened to me. I found I couldn't feel anything. I knew I ought to be heartbroken, but I couldn't feel anything. I seemed dead, too. I knew I ought to cry. Even a crying jag would look better than just standing there. But I couldn't cry. I cursed to myself, "You dirty bastard, it's Mama. You loved her, and now she's dead. She's gone away from you forever. Never. Never again." But it had no effect. All I did was try to explain to myself, she's dead. What does she care if I cry or not, or what I do? It doesn't matter a damn to her. She's happy to be where I can't hurt her ever again. She's rid of me at last. For God's sake, can't you leave her alone even now? For God's sake, can't you let her rest in peace? He pauses, then sneeringly, "But there were several people around, and I knew they expected me to show something. Once a ham, always a ham. So I put on an act. I flopped on my knees and hid my face in my hands and faked some sobs and cried. Mama, Mama, my dear mother." But all the time I kept saying to myself, "You lousy ham. You goddamned lousy ham. Christ, in a minute you'll start singing Mother Macri." He opens his eyes and gives a tortured, sneering laugh, staring into the moonlight. Josie, horrified, but still deeply pitying. "Jim, don't. It's past. You've punished yourself. And you were drunk. You didn't mean..." Tyrone again closes his eyes. "I had to bring her body east. to be buried beside the old man. I took the drawing room and hid in it with a case of booze. She was in her coffin in the baggage car. No matter how drunk I got, I couldn't forget that for a minute. I found I couldn't stay alone in the drawing room. It became haunted. I was going crazy. I had to go out and wander up and down the train looking for company. I made such a public nuisance of myself that the conductor threatened if I didn't quit, he'd keep me locked in the drawing room. But I'd spotted one passenger who was used to drunks and could pretend to like them, if there was enough dough in it. She had parlor house written all over her. A blonde pig who looked more like a whore than 25 whores, with a face like an overgrown doll's and a come-on smile as cold as a polar bear's feet. I bribed the porter to take a message to her, and that night she sneaked into my drawing room. She was bound for New York, too. So every night, for $50 a night, he opens his eyes, and now he stares torturedly through the moonlight into the drawing room. Josie, her face full of revulsion, stammers, "Oh, how could you?" Instinctively she draws away, taking her arms from around him. Tyrone, how could I? I don't know. But I did. I suppose I had some mad idea she could make me forget what was in the baggage car ahead. Josie, don't. She draws back again, so he has to raise his head from her breast. He doesn't seem to notice this. Tyrone, no, it couldn't have been that. Because I didn't seem to want to forget. It was like some plot I had to carry out. The blonde, she didn't matter. She was only something that belonged in the plot. It was as if I wanted revenge. Because I'd been left alone. Because I knew I was lost, without any hope left. That all I could do would be drink myself to death because no one was left could help me. His face hardens and a look of cruel vindictiveness comes into it, with a strange, horrible satisfaction in his tone. No, I didn't forget, even in that pig's arms. I remembered the last 2 lines of the lousy tearjerker song I'd heard when I was a kid kept singing over and over in my brain. And baby's cries can't waken her in the baggage coach ahead. Josie, distractedly. Jim. Tyrone. I couldn't stop it singing. I didn't want to stop it. Josie. Jim, for the love of God, I don't want to hear. Tyrone, after a pause, dully. Well, that's all. Except I was too drunk to go to her funeral. Josie. Oh. She has drawn away from him as far as she can without getting up. He becomes aware of this for the first time and turns slowly to stare at her. Tyrone, dully. Don't want to touch me now, eh? He shrugs his shoulders mechanically. Sorry. I'm a damned fool. I shouldn't have told you. Josie, her horror ebbing as her love and protective compassion returns, moves nearer to him haltingly. Don't, Jim. Don't say I don't want to touch you. It's a lie. She puts a hand on his shoulder. Tyrone, as if she hadn't spoken, with hopeless longing. Wish I could believe in the spiritualist's bunk. If I could tell her it was because I missed her so much and couldn't forgive her for leaving me. Josie. Jim, for the love of God. Tyrone, unheeding. She'd understand and forgive me, don't you think? She always did. She was simple and kind and pure of heart. She was beautiful. You were like her deep in your heart. That's why I told you. I thought. Abruptly, his expression becomes sneering and cynical, harshly. My mistake. Nuts. Forget it. Time I gotta move on. I don't like your damned moon, Josie. It's an ad for the past. He recites mockingly. It is the very air of the moon. She comes more near earth than she was wont, and makes men mad. He moves. I'll grab the last trolley for town. There'll be a speak open and some drunk laughing. I need a laugh. He starts to get up. Josie throws her arms around him and pulls him back, tensely. No, you won't go. I won't let you. She hugs him close, gently. I understand now, Jim, darling. And I'm proud you came to me as the one in the world you know loves you enough to understand and forgive. And I do forgive. Tyrone lets his head fall back on her breast, simply. Thanks, Josie. I knew you. Josie, as she forgives, do you hear me? As she loves and understands and forgives. Tyrone, simply. Yes, I know she. His voice breaks. Josie bends over him with a brooding maternal tenderness. That's right. Do what you came for, my darling. It isn't drunken laughter and a speakeasy you want to hear at all, but the sound of yourself crying your heart's repentance against your breast. His face is convulsed. He hides it on her breast and sobs rackingly. She hugs him more tightly and speaks softly, staring into the moonlight. She hears. I feel her in the moonlight, her soul wrapped in it like a silver mantle. And I know she understands and forgives me too, and her blessing lies on me. A pause. His sobs begin to stop exhaustedly. She looks down at him again and speaks soothingly as she would to a child. There now. He stops. She goes on in a gentle, bullying tone. You're a fine one, wanting to leave me when the night I promised I'd give you has just begun. Our night, that'll be different from all the others, with a dawn that won't creep over dirty window panes, but will wake in the sky like a promise of God's peace in the soul's dark sadness. She smiles a little amused smile. Will you listen to me, Jim? I must be a poet. Who would have guessed it? Sure, love is a wonderful mad inspiration. A pause. She looks down. His eyes are closed. His face against her breast looks pale and haggard in the moonlight. Calm with the drained, exhausted peace of death. For a second she is frightened. Then she realizes and whispers softly, asleep, in a tender crooning tone like a lullaby. That's right. Sleep in peace, my darling. Then with sudden anguished longing, oh, Jim, maybe my love could still save you if you could want it enough. She shakes her head. No, that can never be. Her eyes leave his face to stare up at the sky. She looks weary and stricken and sad. She forces a defensive, self-derisive smile. God forgive me. It's a fine end to all my scheming. To sit here with the dead hugged to my breast and the silly mug of the moon grinning down, enjoying the joke. Curtain.